Hi guitar mates, I hope you are doing well. I wanted to answer a question today that I get asked by a number of my students, and they always ask me the question, what music did I listen to that inspired me to play the guitar? So I thought it would be fun to just put together a list of, I've narrowed it down to 5 albums that inspired me when I was younger to pick the guitar up and to learn how to play it, and really the rest is history from there. Now, to put it into some perspective, my parents really weren't into music. In fact, their entire album collection probably listed no more than 10 albums in total. I think 5 of them were by Joe Loss and his big band sound. So I didn't have a lot of influence from my parents. So that gives you a little bit of background of what my exposure to music was in them early days. But let's get into it and let's go through the 5 albums, starting from the earliest album, which was Band on the Run, Paul McCartney and Wings, which was released in 1973. At the time, all I could listen to was what was on a TV show called Top of the Pops and what was on a normal radio channel, which was just a radio version of Top of the Pops. It was just playing the top 20 chart hits. And I really wasn't that much into them. They all sounded the same. However, having said that, when I listen to the charts nowadays, I wish I could go back to them days of listening to the music that was being written and produced at that time. But again, that's for another video. But back in 1973, when I heard this album, a little light bulb went off. That opening track just sounded so different. It sounded raw, was one of the things I still think about the album. It's got a great sound, but very raw. There was only 3 of them. There was Paul and his wife Linda and Denny Lane. I still listen to Band on the Run, and I must at some point do a lesson on the actual song. I love the way that it was layered. Started off with that basic sound, and then it started to grow the sound. The keyboard started to kick in, and then you got that little violin section that explodes, literally as it says in the song itself. And then we've got that nice kind of rhythmic feel of that acoustic guitar. All them layers of sounds from that track, I just thought they sounded so cool. And I would say that was the initial spark that made me want to learn an instrument, and that instrument was the guitar. Right, let's move on and let's check out number 2. And at number 2, One of These Nights by the Eagles, released in 1975. And all I can really say about the album is that solo. Don Felder's guitar solo. Still, when I hear it, I get the hairs on the back of my neck raising up. I'd never heard anything like that before. When that album came out, them opening notes from that track with that nice sliding down of the bass and that powerful chord behind it, it was just like ear candy. So it was. And then when he hits that guitar solo, that is heaven. It just took me to another place, and I still love listening to that solo. And one day I will play it as close as the quality as Don Felder did. That is a personal mission for me. So let's move on to the next album, which will probably come as a bit of a surprise to you. And the album is Asia by Steely Dan, which was released in 1977. That album, probably as a musician, was the most inspiring album that I'd ever heard. And I've got to say, it still is I love the way that Steely Dan will cover different genres of music. You can't really pinhole Steely Dan and say that's what they are, because they will play jazz, they will play a little bit of rock, a little bit of blues in there, and also funk. It just covers also many different genres. And of course, at the time when I heard this album, I did not know really anything about the musicians that was playing on there. And of course, it's the who's who of the top musicians. We think of Larry Carlton. You know, where do you go from Larry on the guitar? Steve Gadd on the drums. Again, what an influential drummer he has been over the years with Steely Dan, and also various artists, Paul Simon. Just that quality said to me that whenever you are looking at writing a piece of music, or whenever you're playing a piece of music, it's the quality of what you're performing. It's not about the quantity, it's the quality. And Donald Fagen, Steely Dan, Walter Becker, that's one thing that they are so good at doing. So if you haven't heard that and you are an inspiring songwriter, musician, you really do need to check out this album. Now, let's move on and let's get a little bit more rocky with my next one. And the album is Live and Dangerous by Thin Lizzy, released back in 1978. When Live and Dangerous came out and I got to hear it, I loved it. Made me realise at that point that there's times that I do prefer listening to a live album, because I love the way that the musicians, the guitarists, obviously for me, they will change things up. So you get, it's like having version 2 of a song that's got just that feeling that you can do more than what is just down on that record. And that got me into this whole improvisation, because I was starting to play the guitar. I was starting to play in one of my first bands. And my role at that point was the lead guitarist. And I just loved the fact that I could improvise, and they allowed me to do it. It wasn't you could play the set solo. I was allowed to experiment, and I thoroughly enjoyed that. And listening to this album, listening to both guitarists experiment, change the solos up, that said to me, you can do this. This is something that is allowed. Whereas before, everything I heard was done pretty much based on the album, and that's the way you had to play it. But you listen to Still in Love with You. That song really does just always begs for improvisation on the guitar solos. And of course, when you hear Gary Moore, his versions of doing that again just says that. So Live and Dangerous to me was that inspiration to say, you know, it's not just about playing what's in front, it's about going out and experimenting on the guitar and learn how to improvise. That's what's going to make you a better guitarist. And it's this album that did that for me. Right, let's go on to the final one. This album is a little bit out of context as far as the release date, but this album, the guitarist, what a huge influence for me, and I would probably say so many other guitarists. The album was Presence, and the band, of course, Led Zeppelin, which was released back in 1976, hence I say the change of order. You're probably thinking, why? Well, I had not heard of him before, but it's back to the fact that you wasn't being exposed to music the same. You'd never hear Led Zeppelin on Top of the Pops. You wouldn't hear them on normal radio channels, not in the UK. The only time you got to hear contemporary music like that was on a TV show called The Old Grey Whistle Test, which was late at night on a Monday night, a school night. So my dad wouldn't let me stay up late to see that channel. All I get is my friends winding me up, telling me, oh, did you see that band who was on the Old Grey last night? I'm like, no, I couldn't, I had to go to bed. And of course, Led Zeppelin didn't appear live anywhere. there was no video of them in them days, so there was just zero exposure for me on that. And it was only through my mate, drummer from our first band, who put this record on, and he went, you know what, if you're going to play guitar, you got to play like him. And I'm like, well, who's him? And he went, it's Jimmy Page. The only time I'd heard the name Jimmy Page, in fact, was through Paul McCartney mentioning it in the song Rock Show. But after hearing this album, that was it. I was hooked completely on playing rock guitar. Achilles' Last Stand, what a statement. Just an amazing song. It was. And I still maintained that the solo that Jimmy played in that song is far superior to the solo that he did in Stairway to Heaven. Now some of you probably, oh no, but you really do need to listen to that solo. It has just got everything, the aggressiveness on it, just that feeling of the energy that he puts into that. It is an incredible piece of music. Well, they are my pick of the 5 albums that inspired me as a young musician. It'd be great to hear yours. How many of these were yours? If you had to pick 5, what would be your 5? Are any of these in there? If you've enjoyed this little chit chat as well, do let me know. If you didn't, well, keep it to yourself. But I'd like to do more of these. I've got lots of different ideas of things that I can feature that I've picked up over the years, and my ideas on music over the years, and of course my experiences over the years. So do put a comment down there. If you like this, do hit the like button, because that will help the channel to grow, which is what we all want at the end of the day. And don't forget the subscribe button. I always forget that on videos. I'm going to help you. Please subscribe, but do subscribe to the channel. Do hit the like button, and let's have this channel grow, and we'll do more of these little personal chit chats. Anyway, I'm going to let you go for now. Until the next time, this is Jeff Sinker wishing you well. Until then, goodbye.